Hi folks, Jerry Van Sickle, Do It Corporation. I want to talk with you just a little bit about painting a weedless bass jig or a weedless jig. The fiberguard, as you probably can imagine, is a little susceptible to heat and flame, so we've got a problem with the powder painting process. Typically, what we'll do is cast that jig with the base hole pins that come, most of the molds that Do It has, you can use the base hole pin in those molds, which comes in handy. We can powder paint that jig, remove the base hole pin, and epoxy a Weedguard in later. But for those of you that have your heart set on casting that Weedguard directly into the jig, we do have a couple of options here. Do It has come out with a plastic, a heat-resistant and flame-resistant plastic that we can actually use to cover that Weedguard. Now, it's not a plastic that you would find in your typical hardware store, but we can place that over top of that Weedguard to protect it a little bit from the heat. I'll kind of show you what I'm getting at here. We turn our heat source on. Once we've got our heat going, get that on the medium heat, and the heating process and the powder painting process, of course, is pretty much the same. We're just protecting that Weedguard at this point. And we're going to warm that jig and keep it moving so we get a nice, even, uniform heat. We're going to swish that through the powder. You can go back to the heat a little if you need to. Now, we don't want to remove this protective tube quite as quickly as you might think. That Weedguard is going to want to kind of blossom out a little bit. We want to eliminate as much of that as we can. So kind of what we'll do is we'll take and just slowly remove that, leave it on there for just a little while. So you can see it does blossom a little bit, but I think that's minimal. It probably isn't going to hurt a thing. We can hang him up and let him cool. And that's how we're going to powder paint jig heads with the Weedguard. You can give that a try. It'll work for you. It's an option.